Hello, everybody. Julia here, recording this on April 13th, 2025. And I have Jerry Marzinsky here. And he's the person I heard discussing Mace Energy Method a while back and followed his lead and became a certified practitioner as well. And we were just kind of talking about it a little bit before. And you used a lot of other things before you came across Mace Energy Method, and you were just saying that you haven't ever seen anything like it. And
Um,
would you just kind of
I've
expand on that?
I've been in this. Oh no, I must probably over 50 years. I've been in mental health now, and I've never seen anything work like Mace. John Mace was a genius. He was, as far as I'm concerned, he's the equivalent of Freud, only much more functional. His stuff is much more functional. He was a genius as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And in today's world, people are just so overwhelmed with everything, just the amount of information and all the uncertainty. And, we're just so informed now, few decades ago, everybody didn't know what was going on everywhere. And sometimes we don't even really know if it's going on anyway. We're just told all this stuff. But things are changing, the paradigm is shifting in a lot of ways. Like, for instance, people are discovering Mace Energy Method, and I mentioned the telepathy tapes and things like that. And people are realizing the abilities that we have outside of this material, you know, perspective that most people come from. But just seeing what's going on in the world, it really does seem like it's a bigger picture of good versus evil going on. And we have our players that so many people think, the whole Trump thing is just controlled opposition and it's just the whole plot for one world domination. And, they're just tricking us every way they can. But, some of these elites or whatever you want to call them, controllers or people that have all this influence and power, some of them might actually be good people. It seems like everybody just assumes they're all bad and it's just all going to go bad. But I see a lot of good things going on now. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think since we took this country back, things are changing drastically over here for the better. Um, Now the economy is destroyed from you know years and years, decades of bad presidents. Um, what happened after World War II is the U.S. cut Europe and a lot of other nations a lot of slack on the tariffs. So we weren't charging Europe or China or any of these other countries any tariffs, and they were charging us all kinds of tariffs. You know, huge tariffs. So we weren't able to sell United States products in these other countries. So Trump took a look at this and he went, "This isn't fair at all. We're going to change this." And he basically said, "This is what the tariffs we're paying you people. You know, we're going to set up reciprocal tariffs that match what you're charging us to negate those tariffs. And if you retaliate, we're going to increase the tariffs even more." So the two countries that retaliated were Canada with their deep state banker uh, character who's trying to take over their government, and China, which never had fair trade practices. So the tariffs on China are now about 145%. They reciprocated with 145% tariffs on us. Um, the uh, ports are filling up with containers. Uh, Businesses are going down. Um, Chinese businesses are failing. Some of our businesses are failing. Uh, but China is they're not a fair player. They steal technology, they steal innovation, they spy on everything. They take new products, they reproduce them over there at a cheaper price, and they put the people who actually invented these products out of business. Um, so they're not fair players on the world market.
Right, and, everything has to kinda be torn down before it can be built back up again, and there's gonna be growing pains with all that, but it does seem like so much is getting exposed now, and some people say this is the time of the book of Revelation, things are being revealed, and,
Well,
things are just coming to a head. People are realizing the power that they actually have and the control they can have over their lives, and, when they buy into all this fear and worry, scarcity mindset, that just helps perpetuate that reality. So it's great that people are realizing how much power they have in all this. And I always tell people to focus on how you want things to turn out instead of always being negative and saying, well, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, it's going to be World War III, because the more people that, put energy into that makes it more as a possibility.
yeah, that's true. But most nations don't have a constitution like ours. So they have been trying for decades to disarm this country, and they have repeatedly failed at completely disarming us. So we have a completely armed population over here. Um, there's millions of people have guns of all kinds, and they've been trying to. I mean, there was one semi-automatic assault rifle I have here. It's a uh, FAL rifle that the Australians were using in Vietnam. All of a sudden, was it old Bush said, you have to replace at least two of the original parts in that rifle with American-made parts, or it's federally illegal. So this is the kind of bullcrap that they were pulling. Just chipping away. They bought over 1 billion rounds of 9 millimeter uh, uh, pistol ammunition, and these were hollow points. So these were killing rounds. They weren't target practice rounds. What is the U.S. Uh, what was it? The IRS was arming agents with pistols to go and collect taxes, and they were going to increase the taxes. So they had a grip on us that was suffocating. I mean, it's absolutely suffocating. They had control. The deep state had control. The Democrats, all the way down to the city and county levels. They controlled the schools. They controlled the counties. Um, they were like a cancer throughout this entire country, and they stole the last election. They completely stole it, and then anybody who tried to stand up to that, they went after them. Okay? So the only reason that we won last time is that the people just rebelled. I mean, they didn't rebel violently, but they just rebelled, and they just overwhelmed the voting system. So they could no longer fix it because it was just the number of people voting Republican were so great that it just overwhelmed. And even though you could see them trying, I mean, they were still trying uh, to cheat. They stole the governorship in Arizona, the state I'm in. Uh, they blocked the elections. Here's votes coming in days and weeks after that election. Anybody who tried to challenge that election was called an election denier, and they were gone after by the attorney general here in Arizona. But now all this stuff is coming out. I mean, there's conclusive proof that those voting machines were cheating, that they were programmed to vote against uh, Republicans, that they were piling in truckloads of ballots. They were dumping ballots, that all these illegal aliens that they were letting into the country were to get Democratic votes, and the Chinese were helping with that. So, how do you think all these millions of immigrants from South America got here? They had to have food, they had to have water, they had to have transportation, they had to have way stations. A lot of that was paid for by Soros, who was stealing money from the US government to pay for this, and the Chinese. Mm. So we had the Chinese also funneling in tons of fentanyl into this country. We were losing hundreds of thousands of people every year due to the fentanyl. right? And they wouldn't stop. So part of the tariffs that Trump put on them is, if you're going to keep sending fentanyl over here through these drug gangs in Mexico, and sending components of fentanyl to be manufactured in Canada, we're going to tariff both of you. So that's part of what's going on with Canada and Mexico now. You know, Canada has warehouses there, is what I heard, where they put together these components and smuggle them into the United States. So, I mean, this country was on its way down. It was on its way out. Had the Democrats won another time, it would have collapsed. This would have been a Marxist communist country. So we got pulled out just by the skin of our teeth, and thanks to Trump. Now that Trump is putting to the forefront free speech and investigations, we're seeing how amazingly corrupt this entire government was. I mean, they had three, they had six money machines that would pay this U.S. aid bills with. They would just pay it out of thin air. They would just print digital money and pay these bills. You know, it was like a money for worse than a money opera. It was like a, what do you call it? Where they actually make the money illegally. I mean, and the government was doing this. They got caught with six of these machines. And then you got the U.S. aid sending money to, Afghanistan for condoms, uh, um, you know, transvestite training in Afghanistan, all these crazy places. And now they're finding that, thousands of Social Security recipients don't exist. They have a number of them that are 135 years old, 115 years old. So the Social Security Administration has been kind of compromised too. Um, there's virtually not a governmental organization that isn't corrupt here in the United States. And we're all waiting for the arrests here. There's indictments happening right now. It's all being exposed, and there's more exposure every day to how corrupt the government was and who was involved with it. There's investigations going on now. Hopefully, they'll clean this mess up.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are waiting for arrest because we keep hearing about all the corruption and all these people getting called out for becoming multimillionaires on salaries that shouldn't have allowed that.
Yes,
And yeah, and then of course there's the all the immigrants that were being allowed in or being brought in on purpose. And that's not just with the US. That's going on in a lot of countries.
right.
And
They,
that's
they,
that's what this is bringing out because everybody in the world is watching what's going
yep.
on there
They
now. And
wanted
like
to
I said,
erase nationalism.
right. And just yeah, just control everything, but then some people are saying, well, the artificial intelligence operations that they're putting in, they're eventually going to be a technocracy and just take over, and people just have all these conspiracy theories about how bad it can be, but there's also a good opportunity and a good chance that it's going to come out good, you know?
Well, I
So,
think we got a fighting chance now to take this country completely back. And already, uh, Trump and Elon Musk are firing on Starmer over there in Britain, saying, you're acting like a communist country over there. You're locking up old ladies for talking against the government. You're locking up your citizens. You don't have free speech. They don't have free choice of government because you're cheating on your government over there. Same thing with France. Both those countries are on the verge of collapse right now. Both of those countries are interfering with a solution to the Ukraine war. They don't want a solution to that war. Matter of fact, they've donated, I think it was France, uh, donated another $1 billion to Ukraine to keep fighting. Right. So, Zelensky's he's going to keep fighting until they wipe out the male population of Ukraine. But who knows? That might be where it's headed anyway. I mean, the Sicilian mafia has owned Ukraine forever. You know, they're one of the most corrupt countries in the planet. Um, when I visited there probably 20 years ago, I would ask the people, I said, is it better now that you have supposed democracy, or was it better under the Russians? Every single one of them said it was better under the Russians. They weren't happy with the way the government was running, even back then. And then you have Biden, with his Burisma uh, garbage going on, his illegal dealings with Burisma, his threatening the Ukrainian government that if they did a investigation on his son, that he would cut off all aid to Ukraine. I mean, it's. I mean, we haven't had a president that was pro-U.S. here since Kennedy.
Yeah, it's definitely totally different, and it's a movement like none other. And there's just so much going on in so many areas. It's just amazing that as many things are getting addressed and being presented to the public as is happening now. It's just uh, whatever a lot of people have Trump derangement syndrome, and they hear the name and blood pressure goes up and they get real angry and violent. But you know, no one else has had the opportunity to do this. Him being an outsider, not being a career politician, him, not needing money. There's so many things. And, he talked about this whole tariff thing decades ago.
Yes.
Oprah interviewed him, and asked him if he wanted to be president. He was like, no, I don't think so. But yeah,
No,
I mean,
he did not want to be. They approached him long ago and said, we need somebody like you to run for president. And these were the QAnon people, saying our government is being taken over. We need a president who can't be bought off, somebody who's strong enough to do this. And he didn't want to do it, you know, but he was the only one who met the bill. So they couldn't buy him out because he was a billionaire. They couldn't corrupt him because he didn't have anything that they wanted. So boy, they threw everything at him but the kitchen sink. They hit him with everything they could think of. And now there's still all these corrupt federal Democratic judges are trying to throw him for a loop now. But the Supreme Court just ruled they have no jurisdiction over the presidency. So they're still doing everything they can to throw him off. And they're planning to for the next election. Um, they're miserable people. These Democrats. They're just totally concerned with themselves. They could care less about the country or the people in the country. They're in it just for themselves.
right. And you see all these paid agitators at their protests, and all the
Oh,
different
yeah.
things that now they have Musk derangement syndrome too. All the
Yeah.
vandalism, destroying these cars, which they used to love electric cars, right? They wanted everybody to have electric cars to save us from climate change, and now they hate electric cars and they want to, throw bombs on them. So it's just
Well,
crazy.
they're
It's
being
like,
paid $100 a day to do that by Soros.
right.
So
Yeah,
$100, go out and raise hell for $100 and get paid for it.
right.
But they've found I think 3 of these people who burned up the Teslas, and all of them are headed for a 20-year prison sentence. So they're
Well,
going after them. They're going after them hard and fast.
right, and all those Teslas have cameras on them, so the people are all getting, seen. So it's just a matter of time. Yeah, it's just so interesting watching all this. Sometimes it seems so orchestrated or even miraculous, and I think that's why a lot of people think it can't be real. That Trump can't be for real. Just like when he got shot and he did fight, 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 and they had that photo op with the flag behind him. People are like, oh, well, that has to be a false flag because nothing could ever play out like that in reality. But maybe it can.
No, there were more than two people behind that. Came out today that they found two phones that belonged to this would-be assassin, and it was what do you call it? It was like coded stuff on the phones, but they do have the phones, so I think they'll be able to trace back. It was a plot. He wasn't uh, a lone person. The FBI had been in contact with him well before this, and who knows who else. But, he had a couple of phones with him at the time, and they have them now. So hopefully they'll get to the bottom of who paid for this.
Right? And also the fact that Secret Service wasn't on their game when it happened. The guy was just standing there on the roof and
Yep.
nobody really noticed him. It's like,
Yep.
really?
Even though they gave warnings, so here's people running to the police saying, "Listen, there's somebody with a gun on the roof," and they one cop went up there. He looked. The guy pointed his gun at him, and he went down, and nothing ever happened from that point on. You know, the Secret Service was completely complicit in this. So that's how deep it went. They wanted to take him out. They still want to take him out. You know?
Yeah.
So the deep state is in trouble because he's cut off their funding sources now. Now that he's cut off all this corrupt money, they can't pay for assassins. They can't pay for riots. They can't pay for all these major things that they were paying for before. To get rid of Trump. So we'll have to see what happens with this tariff stuff.
Right. And a lot of people criticize his politics with Israel too. Like you were talking about censorship, and a lot of people say the one guy at the university that he took away the green card because he was doing, pro-Palestine protests. And of course, there's more to it than all that. Now, a lot of people are crying foul on Trump, saying that that's censorship by, not letting these people have their protest. So, it's a tricky thing, and just the whole international politics that's going on right now. But yeah, it's just kind of a crazy time.
Yeah, things are changing. They're changing quickly.
Right. So, and then all this stuff with Iran and nuclear weapons. And some people are like, well, why does America get to have nuclear weapons? If they get to have them, everybody should be able to have them. Because,
Well, look what they did to Gaddafi. They told Gaddafi, hey, you give up your research on nuclear weapons, and everything will be okay. We'll protect you. You know, Look what happened to him. So you really can't trust the West. So no telling what'll happen if Iran gets nuclear weapons. I mean, that's a scary thought. But on the other hand, you look at Trump. I mean, you look at what's happening in the legislature here in the U.S. Every Republican senator has an Israeli monitor. There's somebody from Israel who's following them around and tracking them. There's no other country does that. You know, Trump, I think, has made some kind of deal with the Jews to get in office, and they have a hold on him. Matter of fact, they were bragging about how much control they had on him just last week, and it came out and hit the underground, and they were playing these tapes of these Israeli politicians saying, "Oh yeah, we got Trump in our corner. We got him under control." That's a little scary. And then they have this anti-Semitism stuff where if you say anything against the Jews, you're anti-Semitic. You know, there's no other country that I know of that you can speak against that where they turn on you for speaking against them. So there's something going on with Trump and the Jews. Um, I don't like it. I don't like it that it seems they have way too much control over Trump and over the U.S. Government. There's a lot of senators and congressmen in government that are dual citizens with Israel. So Israel has one of the most powerful lobbies of any in the United States government, which is something else that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Uh,
they seem to have a lot of control worldwide for whatever reason. And like you said, you can't say anything negative, whatever. You can't question any stories they say. You just have to, or else you get in trouble. And that's one of the things they said about Trump with the student. I think it was at Columbia. Can't remember the guy's name, but yeah, trying to, get him, make him leave the country just because he was protesting pro-Palestine. And that whole mess too, that's a big mess too, the whole Hamas thing and Islam and all these,
yeah,
you know, these
yeah,
people that are just evil, evil people out there.
yeah. You look at how many Palestinians were killed in Gaza. I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of civilians killed in Gaza, and the Israelis were referring to uh, the it's virtual genocide of the Palestinians as mowing the grass. And it's like, oh yeah, we got to go cut them down. It's what's going on over there is I don't know. I mean, they've been fighting for hundreds of years. I don't know what the solution is over there, but violence isn't going to cure it.
Right.
Never has. I don't think it ever will.
Yeah, and the US doesn't need to get involved like they went over there and started bombing Yemen, you know, the whole
No, they don't.
thing.
I don't think Trump understands the Yemenis. You as long as Iran keeps supplying them weapons, they're going to keep shooting them. Now, our ships have been hit over there, but they won't say anything about it over here. They've fired volleys of rockets and drones at our ships, some of which have been hit, but they won't report that over here. Which ships were hit, how many sailors were lost. It doesn't hit the news at all. They act like we're invulnerable. Now, I know they were hit. They At least one of the carriers was hit because it knocked out one of their Hawkeyes. Right. So that that carrier no longer had eyes in the sky. It was blind because one of the rockets hit the deck and blew up a Hawkeye, one of the big radar coordination planes that they have. So, the US is taking their hits over there, but they don't want that out in public here in the US. So none of that information is getting back here. Now, that's not the first time our ships have been hit over there. I think they sent one carrier back for battle damage from over there because they can hit moving ships. They have the technology to do it. This isn't the same war with, AK-47s and just people waving and shooting rifles. This is a whole
Right.
different ball game.
Right. It's not even planes so much, it's drones and
Hmm.
certain technology and cyber attacks and who knows
Yeah,
what else. They can always go chemical, biological, radiological. There's too many things going on. It's just amazing we haven't ended it all yet. So I think
but
there's a bigger picture happening in this realm, like I said it earlier, it's like good versus evil going on, and
yes,
evil evil has to always have energy put into it to maintain, where
yeah,
good gives energy off, when things are positive, they flow.
and
So,
unfortunately,
also,
we have dark players like the CIA who set up 16 biochemical labs in Ukraine along the border with Russia with plans to release that stuff into Russia. I mean, no wonder Russia was wigging out. You know, once we took over Ukraine, once the Minsk agreements went down, they never had any intention of keeping those agreements with Russia. They broke them voluntarily. They were building an army to invade and destroy Russia. They completely misjudged how powerful and how stable Russia actually is. Russia has very little national debt. We're trillions of dollars in debt. Russia has no major national debt. They're almost solvent by themselves. They haven't borrowed a lot of money from anywhere, but this war is costing them greatly. But there's nobody to negotiate with. You know, you got the French and the British. They keep funding that war, so not going to be any peace while Zelensky's getting money. Zelensky's grabbing people off the street, forcing them into the army with a week's training, putting them on the front lines. You know that invasion of Kursk. There was no military value to that. It was all political. You know, now it's crazy. It's nuts.
Yeah,
Y-
and of course, a lot of the soldiers are running away if they can. I mean, it's just horrific what's going on
Yeah.
in these places, and why, we're supposed to be like mature adults that they can't figure out ways to handle situations and conflicts without having people kill each other. It's just insane.
Well, that's what the deep state wants. They want a smaller population, and that's what these chemtrails are. You know, those guys are still up there. You know, they're spraying virtually every planet or every country on the planet. You know, they're spraying population areas. There's one pilot. He was with the German airlines, Lufthansa, where he got fired because he didn't turn on those sprayers over a city that he was flying over. They fired him. So those chemtrails, you can see them. I mean, they're not contrails. Contrails disappear behind the jet after a short period of time. These things spread out all over the sky. Those chemtrails are full of barium, aluminum, cesium, um, coal dust. It's all toxic. It's toxic to plants. It's toxic to animals. You know? And they're saying that they're using it as a solar block to keep the Earth from heating up. It's a bunch of crap. Matter of fact, it's trapping more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than it's doing, and they're still doing it, and it's happening all over the world. It's not just happening here; it's happening all over the world. You know,
Right. Who do you think's responsible for that? Since it is worldwide. Because
well, the deep
one of my
state,
friends,
the the deep state for one. You know, they want the population reduced. It's much harder to control a big population. So here comes COVID. You know, and now you look at the Chinese population. They're looking at multiple millions of people have vanished. They've died. Young people that are dying of heart attacks and turbo cancer right now at astounding rates. You know, their crematoriums were just running 24 hours a day for a long period of time. So the deep state wants the population reduced. You know, and they're
probably,
paying these non-governmental organizations to spray these chemicals over our country. So the government is paying them to kill us.
right? Because one of my friends was saying, well, I don't think Trump's doing anything for us because we still have chemtrails, we still have the horrible pharmaceutical industry, doing their thing. But of course, he can't do everything at once. He can't
No,
change
no.
everything at once.
He's overwhelmed. Look at what he's done in just the few weeks he's been in office now. I mean, he's
Right,
done an incredible amount. You know, scores of these um, executive orders absolutely reversing much of what Biden did to destroy this country. And now you've got investigations going on all over the place. I can't wait for people to start getting arrested and thrown in prison. You know, some of these
right,
bad actors like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and his son. You know,
right. Been
absolutely
waiting for
corrupt.
that for a long time
Yeah.
because I know when Trump won in 2016 with all the Q info, people were saying, "Oh yeah, these are all doubles now, and the real people are in Guantanamo Bay, and they're having tribunals and all these things." But that doesn't seem like that's how it played out. So we need to see all this like in real life. None of these stories about it. So yeah, it'll be real nice to see when that happens. But yeah, I have a lot of hope and faith in Trump and what he's done so far, and I know a lot of people are very skeptical, but I see, never seen anything like this in my life, with
Oh,
government the way it's going now, and then all this corruption getting exposed, and
yeah, I think
yeah,
he's the only hope the planet has right now. There's nobody
well, and
else
just
can do what he's doing right now.
right, and just the way the opposition is responding, the liberals, look
Oh,
at how they're
they're going
responding.
nuts.
Nobody's seen anything like that before ever. It's just, yeah, it's
Oh,
just
we've seen it before. We saw it when, they were burning down Portland, when they were taking over sections of the city in Portland, when uh,
right,
they were shooting people and getting away with it. And anybody who tried to defend themselves was automatically guilty. I mean, they're violent. The Democrats are violent. They started the Civil War here. They started this nonsense. They started all this corrupt stuff. They're just in it for power and control. They could care less about the people or the country.
right. And I love how they're always trying to say about the insurrection and, all the stuff with the Capitol when, they were sitting there just opening the door, letting people
Yeah.
in. You have all this video that
Yep. You got
anybody
all this
would,
right. Got all this
and
video of the Capitol Police escorting
right,
these people through the thing, and still they're saying, "Oh yeah, it was an insurrection. It was an insurrection."
right. And then
The ins-
they said police were killed and no police were
no
killed there. They
police were killed.
committed suicide later or something like that,
They
which
they
probably
shot
didn't even happen.
they shot an innocent protester there, murdered
Right,
her. That guy still
right.
hasn't been brought to justice.
But yeah, I mean,
And
I watched all that happen live. And then for them
lies.
to make it seem like it was some kind of riot when I just, people were just hanging out and doing, some
Yeah.
people did some stupid things, but most people were just standing around going, oh, wow, what do we
You know,
do
if,
now?
if there was any
Go to
insurrection, it was
prison?
a takeover of this country by the Democrats in the last election with Trump. That's an
Right,
insurrection. That's treason. Those people need to be locked up.
right. And then all those people that were locked up just for showing up that day,
Yeah,
you know, they
yeah,
didn't do anything and they spent 4 years in prison for nothing.
right,
Then they
right.
were treated very poorly in prison too, worse than the typical prisoner.
They ought to
So
take
yeah,
all those politicians who push that and lock them up in that same facility. Let them rot there for 4 years.
right, and let those former prisoners be their guards.
Yeah, we got all that going on, but I think Trump's a blessing. He's a blessing to this country, and the deep state is going to keep doing everything they can to bring him down. But so far they've failed. Everything they've tried has failed. Um, so I have a lot of hope that he's going to get the U.S. on its feet, but our economy is still going to crash. I mean, there's so much damage to it; it's going to crash. And here's the deep state trying to pull this, uh, monetary, uh, digital currency crap. That's just going to be another way to control us further.
Yeah, yeah,
They're already trying to bring it out. They succeed with that, we're gone. But Trump said not going to happen in the U.S. So you know the economies are going to collapse. Germany and France are already on the brink. Um,
yeah. It's a very volatile time, but I think ultimately, yeah, it's going to be unrecognizable when all is said and done. And it needs to be because, yeah, it's just been getting, and for decades we've all known about all the
yeah,
crazy spending in government. You heard about it decades ago. Yeah, they spent $5,000 for a toilet seat or whatever, and nothing
yeah,
was ever done about it. And all these politicians, even Obama was saying, yeah, we need to clean up all this
yeah,
frivolous spending and corruption and all this stuff. And then when somebody finally does it, they get all upset about it. So you wonder why? Well, no, you know why. So
yeah.
yeah,
You look at
everyone's getting exposed and they don't like it.
Obama. He entered the presidency, I think, with a couple $100,000 to his name. Came out of there with multi-million-dollar and a massive multi-million-dollar mansion on the ocean. Where'd that
Right.
money come from? For what?
With
He
his
was a
best
pu- he
friend,
was
his
a f-
really good
he,
son.
he was a freaking puppet. He just did whatever the deep state told him to.
Right, and
And
there's
so,
so
so
many
did
of those.
Biden.
But Yeah, so many in politics and even in just anyone with fame. There's so many of them that have been blackmailed, and so then they just have to do whatever they're told because they have the goods on them. And that's so sad, but that's probably really how it works.
Yeah,
And
yep. Blackmail,
then you,
paying them off.
and then we have RFK Jr. and some people are saying he's not moving fast enough, but he said he's calling out this whole measles panic they were trying to push, and he was saying, "Look, I want to find out if vaccines are safe, and I don't want to force anyone to take them. Everybody should be able to, look at the research and decide for themselves whether they want to pursue it." So that's better than anyone else has ever said because we all know the pharmaceutical industry is one of the worst mafias out there, especially
Oh yeah,
that, right?
I know that they're freaking out of control. I mean, now they're feeding these uh, antipsychotic neuroleptic drugs to kids. You know, thousands and thousands of kids in the United States are being put on antipsychotic drugs, and those drugs are they're dangerous. They actually shrink your brain. They kill brain cells. Um, some of these long-term clients who've been in the mental hospitals uh, for decades, they've taken them out when they died and did autopsies on them. They found their brains were shrunk like walnuts, and it was due to these antipsychotic drugs that they had them on for years. So these drugs actually do permanent neurological damage to people with schizophrenia, and they're just prescribing them like they're candy bars or M&Ms or something. Um, giving them
Right.
kids, giving them everybody. Their side effects are god awful, um, and they're telling people that's it. That's the only thing that can be done for schizophrenia. Where I've had a handful of patients who said they were hearing voices, and those voices disappeared after a Mace session. Now, I've had other schizophrenic patients who the voices didn't disappear after the Mace session, but actually uh, interfered with the session. They would not let the person form an image. They would not let the person follow instructions.
Right. So in your practice, do you only use Mace Energy Method now?
I like to use it exclusively. Now, if it fails, I have other things that I can do um, that aren't near as effective, but they do work. Um, but I think Mace works better than anything else I've ever seen, and it works quicker and with more permanent results than anything I've ever seen. I mean, people are coming out of there. You know, have people like 75, 80 years old that had some trauma happen to them when they were 6 or 7, where they decided that I'm stupid and I'm worthless. And they lived their whole lives based on that premise. And we get rid of that, and it's like they're free of that after spending their whole life living with that assumption, with that program. Uh, I think that John Mace he was a genius.
Right. And does it work with everyone? Or there's some people that it doesn't work with that you found in your practice?
Yeah. Anybody who can't form an image or concentrate well enough to form an image, for the most part, won't work.
Right.
It won't work with regressed schizophrenics. People that are have hear many voices and are verging on being incoherent. They have to be able to concentrate to some degree. They have to be able to hold an image because um, what Mace is actually doing is taking a mental state, a subconscious mental state that they call a negative identity, which has been buried in the subconscious mind, and giving it another layer of reality by turning it into an image. Okay. And once it's turned into an image, then the spirit can drain it, but not before. So it's just amazing how Mace found that if you take that negative identity and all its characteristics and you turn it into an uh, image that represents that negative identity and have the person concentrate on that, the spirit will then drain it. Now, Mace found that energy flows from negative to positive. So the soul is positive, the negative identity is negative. So it's like when you hook up a connection with a battery. Okay, you have the positive, the negative pole. You get a piece of wire, you loop them together. That wire will heat up as the electricity in that battery flows from the negative pole to the positive pole. And once that battery is drained, it's dead. So Mace visualized the human being as a energetic being with the spirit being positive and all these negative identities uh, being negative. Okay. So he found that trauma created those negative identities because the all your attention is put on you during a trauma and you're not paying attention to anything outside of what's happening to you. All right. So your attention's totally focused on you. Mm. And it's just normal to look for, well, why is this happening to me? What is going on here? Who am I? Um, why? And it's very painful, a trauma. So the person makes some quick decisions as to what is happening, what relationship he has to that trauma, and that trauma then causes a um, negative emotion and a negative identity. So there's a negative emotion, a negative emotional decision, and a negative identity, personal identity. So there's two components there. Yeah. So the whole shebang, because it's painful, and that pain interferes with the person's functioning and survival. That that whole shebang, that whole negative identity gets thrown into the subconscious by the ego that shows up and says, "Listen, I can handle this. I can get rid of this pain so you don't feel it." And there's kind of like a subconscious permission. Yeah, just get rid of it. I can't deal with it. So once it gets buried in the subconscious, it's locked in there. It's still alive. Not it's not dead. It's still alive. So because it's alive, it keeps manifesting through the ideas that it's pushing onto the individual. You know, for instance, the person might have come to the decision that I'm stupid or I'm worthless. Right? That gets buried in there, and that's in play their entire lives until that negative identity is discharged. So that negative, Mace viewed that negative identity as a negative energy. So like the negative post of a battery. Right? And he made um, what do you call it? The example is like if you get a brand new car battery and you charge it up till it's full to overflowing, and then you drain it down to nothing by shorting that battery till there's no electricity in it at all, you can't recharge that battery ever again. It's dead. It could be a brand new battery. You drain all the electricity out of it, all the energy out of it, and it's dead. It's garbage. So he saw the same thing happening with these negative identities. Okay. Once you make up the hookup with the spirit, where where the negative energy is flowing, okay, then the spirit will discharge that negative identity by the person holding their attention on the image that they formed of that negative identity, which represents it. Okay. Then the energy will drain from that negative identity down to the spirit, which is positive energy, and It will be drained till there's nothing left of it. Once it's drained, it no longer exists. It's no longer in the person's physical sphere. And you can't destroy energy. You can only change its form. So what the spirit does, it takes that energy and it turns it into positive energy. It transforms that negative energy into positive energy. And a MACE patient will often feel much more energy after the session than before, because now they don't have that negative cloud, that blockage, blocking their energy flow from their body. So MACE is an energetic psychotherapy. I've never seen anything work like it. And another strange thing is it deals with trauma, but the therapist, the MACE therapist, does not have to know what that trauma was. They don't have to know, what happened, who caused it, you know, when it happened, none of that stuff, you know. And there's a number of sessions I've come out of where I had no idea what happened to the person. They were feeling better, but I had no idea what that trauma was that caused that negative identity that we got rid of. So here's Mace getting rid of psychological problems permanently. And if you go to a psychiatrist, you're going to be drugged. They drug your brain. They don't cure anything. Nobody's getting better from anything. All they do is treat the symptoms, with dangerous drugs, with dangerous side effects. And they don't want any information about Mace getting out to the public. You know, it's a threat to them, both psychology and psychiatry. Um, they want to keep it
Right.
down.
And talk therapy as well, because people go to talk therapy for decades and they just rehash their traumatic incident, and it just reinforces that negative identity and sometimes creates more. So after decades of talk therapy, they're often worse off and not better off than when
Right.
they started, because
And
they just
uh,
rehashed it so much. So
I've
yeah,
seen
with
that
me,
too. It was,
yeah, real refreshing. You do have to feel the pain for a little while.
yeah,
And
a
I
short
think in
while.
today's world, people are needing more follow-ups, after that initial session and the follow-up, just because there's so much out here in the world now. People are overwhelmed. When Mace was first discovered, it was before the internet was really booming, and we had all this information overload, and we just know every little thing that's going on everywhere that can concern us and affect us. So I think that's why people are need. Do you find that people need more than just the first session and the follow-up?
Well, a full session from what most therapists are charging can be pretty pricey for most people. So I kind of let them, after the first session, I go to, okay, this is what we would normally work on next. Do you want to do that? I give them the choice, and if they do, I'll sign them up for another session. If they don't, they're free to recontact me. But I'm not telling them what they have to do when they come into the session. Uh, I'd usually start out with the rune, which is the one that's causing them the most trouble, and I'll carry them as far as they can go, as fast as they can process. If they can process through the rune, and they have time for a relationship, I'll do that whole thing. Um, if they want to keep coming back, that's okay too. So, but I give them the choice. I don't say, okay, this is what it is. Um, you have to come for 2.5 or 3 hours.
Right. Yeah, because it is different for everyone, and it's just a matter of whatever they have to work on. So
Yeah,
yeah.
but it works significantly better than any other psychotherapy I've ever seen. It works better than drugs, than these psychotropic drugs that psychiatry is filling people full of. So this system would be a major threat to psychiatry and psychology because it works, simply because it works. It gets to the problem, it gets to the psychological problem, and it converts it from negative energy to positive energy and drains it so it no longer exists in that form, in that person. It's out of their universe. It's gone.
Right. Very awesome. And there's so many energy healing modalities out there now, So many people after 2020 really started paying attention to what the pharmaceutical industry was up to. And so people are turning more to that because we are first and foremost energetic beings. We're energetic spiritual beings. And the physical part is secondary. And, we got that all mixed up in the way we view things. So it's so nice to see that paradigm shift happening. And like I mentioned earlier, and I'll send you videos about the telepathy tape and this
Oh,
other
yeah.
lady, Vita Austin, that's worked with those people too in water. It's just the paradigm really is shifting. People are learning how to do things like lucid dream and remote view and astral project. They've been doing that for a while, but from what I've seen and understand, everybody has those abilities. It's just a matter of putting in the effort and the time to, get back in touch with what we're really capable of. So it's just an amazing time to be alive and witness to all this. No other time in history that we know of that's been like it is now. So yeah, just
Yeah.
amazing time.
Yep. Yeah. Things are changing fast. You know.
Super fast. But yeah, I really appreciate you talking with me. And
No problem.
uh, yeah, and yeah, we'll see how things play out. Let's hope for the best with everything. And I wish the U.S. would just get out of other people's conflicts and would
Yeah.
come to light what's going on with Israel and how they have so much control. And there's lots of people talking about that and how that all works. But yeah,
Yeah. That's one thing that the U.S. got to. They have to stop. They just been carrying on wars all over the world forever. That's a military industrial complex in control of Congress and the Senate.
right.
They need to be brought down, and they're doing a audit on the Pentagon right now. So they're going to find massive amounts of money disappeared from the Pentagon. And I heard the CIA sent a message to Trump is like, okay, go ahead and take on all these other places, but don't touch the CIA. So there was like a threatening note I heard they sent to him.
Yeah, it's a big mess. So like I said, just have to hope for the best and watch the show and, you know, do your best and get your energy cleaned up the best you can. And yeah, and like I always say, focus on what you want and how you want things to be.
Yeah, so any of you people listening to this, if you want to try a Mace session, go to causisminstitute.com. There's a list of therapists there that you can choose from all over the planet. So uh, about 2 months ago, Cherie said there were only about 50 of us on the planet now. I think she's got about 20 in training. So maybe that'll boost it up to 70.
Right. Yeah. It's expanding and more people are hearing about it and benefiting from it. So yeah, word is getting out.
Yeah, it needs to. Because
Yeah.
psychiatry and psychology are not going to help put this out. You're not going to find it written up in any of their journals or Psychology Today or anything like that. It's not going to be out there that way.
Yeah. So there you have it. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And like I said before, remember to focus on what you want and help others if you can. Ciao, ciao.